Okay. Thank you. Short pause.
Mhm.
So how are we doing so far? Everything is a infrastructure cost. It takes time, etc. And because our data infrastructures have been invested in for quite a long time, getting more value out of them makes sense. Back to your
Mhm.
pitch, right? Your
Mhm.
pitch, right? However, you and I want to do something completely different, I think. So I'm going to show you what I've done so far. But how am I on my what would that be called? A
Yeah.
bad mental model,
All
right?
right.
That everything
Well,
is
I
automatically always profitable, and if it isn't measured that way, then something's wrong, right? And that's why also emotional costs of being in a um, uh, infrastructure building phase are huge, right? We both need to become educated. I'm trying my best to be educated. It's a huge sunk cost because I don't know if I'm even learning the right things. I'm thankful for GPT just because it makes me feel like it's a little less hopeless.
Yeah, well, I was thinking that you would be going with a bell curve, normal distribution of things. Um, so you could
Well,
say
I just
that,
mean time. Things actually go up and then
yeah.
they go down. That was my point, right? Like, yes, at a
Oh,
point
okay,
in
okay.
time, you distribute things. But if you're
Hmm.
talking about time itself, things have to be,
Uh-huh.
in this cyclical thing because things are happening all the time, right? We're just in a wave. So I'm looking at the
Okay,
world in
all right.
terms of wave
Okay, I
functions now,
gotcha. I gotcha.
and
Mhm.
because math is really good at compressing dimensions into one dimension, artificially, of course, because
Mhm.
things are not in one dimension, they're always going everywhere, right? That's one thing is the math can be very flat, but the actual dimensions we have, well, this is matrix multiplication, right? It's three-dimensional, which is more reasonable, but we always had flat, we had a book of normal distributions forever, right? That's like a
Mhm.
flattening. Does that make sense? Is that reasonable? I'm not a mathematician, but you remove all the dimensions to make something easier, which is a good
Mhm.
intro into what I'm trying to do, maybe. Right? I'm trying to make it simple and it keeps getting more complicated. But go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So I think that what the normal distribution is basically a distribution of almost everything in the universe,
Hmm.
given the sufficient size of the sample, and basically the bell kind of tells you how many observations or maybe how many emotions can be in a specific interval, right? So
Sure.
maybe we will be average into some sort of a situation where the majority of people who are using computers for certain specific task will be kind of distributed that way. Like the top of the curve, there is going to be like the highest frequency of some sort of an emotion, and then kind of like going to the left or to the right, we will kind of maybe go to the frequency of people super happy is going to be really low, and the frequency of people being super unhappy you know maybe will be kind of also very low, but the top of the curve is not going to be probably in the middle, kind of like people average happy. Maybe there is going to be kind of like a shift somewhere. So yeah, uh, I guess this is you know showing a bell curve is always a safer model than kind of showing a straight line, which which will require a careful definition of what we are mapping, because a straight line implies that there is a horizontal dimension and there is a vertical dimension, right? So I think just my nerdy addition to your idea.
Well, and I think it's still open-ended, right? The
Yeah.
concept is that along with any efforts, and let me just show you what I've been building, and
Okay.
maybe I can give you a better. Okay. Oh, and I can tell you that I'm having I'm just learning, right? So my curve is, I'm still
Mm.
in infrastructure, and
Mhm.
and as much as people talk about vibe coding, I'll tell you what I've learned, and please be honest. So
All right.
let's just take a look at this construct here. So there's a few components, and this is just the code component. And all that's happening in the code component here is trying to understand an architecture, which is new to me. I've never worked with Node. I kind of have heard of all these things, but I'm trying to figure out
Mhm.
like how do these things happen, or how do they get put together. But my goal is that there's two things. There's some sort of a service to gather information. And what
Mhm.
that information is almost all qualitative information. Okay, that's the real goal here. So, yet the structure has to come from somewhere. So I've found a thing called Obsidian, and Obsidian probably is similar to a whole bunch of other stuff because you know how there's so many different versions of things. But this is like a graph-based world where you use
Mhm.
Markdown and you use graphs in order to. I'm kind of using it right now for a couple things. So let me show you that. But I do have I also finally figured out how GitHub works. So I'm I'm happy to share this. It's on GitHub. It's public if anyone wants to go take a look at it and help me out. But the feedback system is to understand human rhythms. So pretty big idea so far, right? These can be emotions, but it really has to do with whenever there's anything to be done, your emotional state and your I'm calling it energy toward it is important, right? That's going to somehow give you
Mhm.
some flavor about how things are going. And we have these rituals like if we work next to each other and we're stumped, we're going to turn to our neighbor and interrupt them while they're working and say, God, I'm really stumped. Hey, Jack, help me out, right? Do you know how to
Mhm.
whatever, right? And that's
Mhm.
great for you because the person's there, but then that person gets interrupted. And you know what I mean? It's this flow state, right? The flow state is that you feel productive, which happens, I would say, never, right? Or very rarely, in real life, right? You're always being interrupted. Yet,
Mhm.
maybe your tasks are simple enough. Who knows? Again, or as I said, not everybody is doing something challenging, right? They might just be answering an email. And maybe you've answered 10 emails and you're feeling good about yourself. You're happy for lunch. Either way, this is to take ideas and figure out what are there's two people. There's a participant. This is the person digging the ditch, right? And then there's the
Mhm.
strategist. And the strategist, in my understanding, might be a supervisor, but I think of it more. I like this word strategist only because your goal is to make sure you can help remove blocks and keep alignment on the goals. And that means you may or may not have to change things, right? Because
Mhm.
you're keeping your eye on the big picture, let's say, while others are maybe working on the inner workings. The model so far, are you feeling it? What do you think?
Oh yeah, 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 definitely.
Okay.
I, th- I think that yeah, those are basically roles, right? Like those may be like archetypes, right, for roles that you wanna create. So
Yeah, well,
there's.
let me just show you the pieces, right? So all I
Mhm.
needed to do
Mhm.
was to capture some info. So now I'm going to share with you my extremely simple form. And right now, this is yet to be completely wired up, but I think it's
Mhm.
pretty easy. Um, so a form to capture. Where are you? There we go. Okay. So right now, all we've got so far is, some vague goals, right? And this is, just placeholders, but this has some tasks, which is reading an article, boosting grammar, might be a quiz. I don't know, whatever. These are just arbitrary, but I'm going to work on this quiz, or I am working on this quiz, and I'm feeling not so good about it. And then I can give some flavor to this, right? It's like just getting started. And once I submit this, I'm going to show you what happens, right? But I can just keep doing this. And in fact, this front end I think is probably better considered. Maybe what we'll, there's so many fun things you can do because I haven't put in AI yet, but maybe this is just a chat bot, right? Like it can read energy based on the words that you use, right? Or it can come up with something like that. I don't think that's that's too hard, right? To start to have a couple of different measures.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, generating this kind of data doesn't, again, it doesn't have to be this formal, but it's the idea that we want a lot of data and we want a lot of qualitative data. And the actual uh, Jira part, like here's a task that you're supposed to do, is, well, it's not the main part. So let's go into Obsidian, where you can start to see some of this make some sense. Obsidian, where are you? There you go. Okay, so I'm just learning Obsidian, and right now we've got formatting and such about what a goal is, right? And then tasks, and then I'm using some specific words about resonance, right? Because what I want ultimately, and then here's some tasks. Tasks are pretty, you know, self-explanatory too, and they can be more complex. It doesn't really matter, right? But and we've got actors. And one thing I really actually like is we can start to begin to model how people like to work, right? Like maybe they have certain times or maybe they have certain habits that they don't themselves realize. And I don't know, there's interesting stuff here. You could also put people's resumes in because as you're building out a group of people to work on something, like how the heck do you know, right? Like sometimes you just throw the same set of tools at every job, but maybe there are better people or other skills. Anyway, there's a whole mix in here in order to get data, qualitative data about how things are going. Am I making any sense?
Yeah. 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 Very good. Yeah, I think this kind of like the Obsidian gives you kind of like on the left hand side gives you a way to define those concepts, and then you can relate them. Mm, so yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Well, and then here's our data, right? Now we're just getting
Mhm.
Miguel, which is me, right? I'm Miguel, is
Okay.
doing something and, they have a certain energy level, right? And then they're going through here. And so now that we've got data, we have data on what people are thinking about or focusing on, right? We have a data about how they feel about it. So far, so good, right? There's
Mhm.
there's something there's something going on. So then you get to where the strategist comes in. And obviously, the first thing you can do is just start to do some basic, you know, modeling, right? However, being me, I'm like, well, actually, what the goal of this ultimately is either for me, the person working on it, or the strategist is to understand how things are going, you know?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so when it comes down to these goals, there's going to be our confidence intervals again. And these confidence intervals are a relationship between the energy on the task. They aren't about it being done, they're about how people feel about it, right? And so, what should happen is when you have a whole big group of tasks that things get worked on, then it sort of ebbs and flows. And what we're trying to do is not make the minute by minute things mean so much. Instead, we want to kind of go back to our normalization curve, right? Is like, when do things need attention, right? When does the plan need to change? Because for the most part, I think the hardest thing to do when it comes down to big planning and executions is to do as little as possible and give as much feedback and encouragement to the people doing it.
Mm.
And so the only thing that happens with Obsidian is it just lets you build these things later, right? Like, I mean, this is almost honestly just a data structure that we could use SQL and query and then use some
Mhm.
other,
Mhm.
but Obsidian throws it all in, and I'm trying to understand how graphs work anyway,
Mhm.
which um, I don't understand yet. So then I guess the last thing is a concept which I'm trying to add to this, which is called oh, got it. It is MCP. I know, acronyms, right? So this is another new architecture, which is going to be more AI centric, which is a model context uh, relationship, right? That things,
Yeah.
right? Because when I'm working in GitHub, it is focused on a context. It just gives me one thing, and I started to build, and the more that I build, the more haywire things tend to go because its context is either, it's based on kind of one thing, whereas we're building out a lot of things, right? And this is the same thing with people. If you and I are the only people that work on these projects like I am, like I don't need to have a meeting and tell people how I've been doing because there's only just me. And now I'm reporting to you, my boss, right? And you are now saying to yourself, God, he does not have a clue as to what is going on. But I'll let him go. It seems reasonable. He's done something. You see what I mean? Like, we're not good at management, I think, in general, right? I mean, we should be good, however, at seeing when plans go south, right? That, hey, the dishwasher broke. My dishwasher broke, and guess what? For a month or so, I did dishes. Okay, that's a reasonable thing to do, right? You don't want the dishes to just get piled up. And I started to realize it's like, oh, it's pretty good to have a dishwasher. It does save you some time, but it isn't 100% necessary. But in the real world, decisions get made all the time that completely, are like focused on, well, I don't have the dishwasher yet. And, there's a million things to slow things down. And over scoping and all these other things, I think it's the emotional engagement that people are having, which is the thing that you want to keep going. And I don't think that's actually too big of a, if anyone's coached Little League, right? It's all hustle, right? It's not skill. It's all attitude. Yet, because we don't measure this at all, I think this is a framework to start trying to play with it. You're my boss. Have I made a
Yeah.
good point?
Yeah, those emotional scores, there's something to it. I mean, it's not just about the task, whether it has to be done or not, whether it fits the epic or whatever, but yeah, you are right that sometimes those tasks will be done better, sometimes they will not be done, and that score, or maybe a collection of scores, because the emotional, fuzzy kind of the description of how we feel about it might entail many components to it. But yeah, I can see the value that there is there, right? Like, hey, I'm looking at the task and it's a chore, and yeah, definitely it's going to impact the task, right? Maybe I'm going to kind of deprioritize it, or maybe I will ignore it, or maybe I will do it grudgingly, and then other tasks will suffer kind of as a result of it, because now I lost my day. It just ruined my day, right? And
We saw it yesterday. People couldn't wait to sell everything until they didn't, and then they bought everything. See what I mean? Like, that's 1000% emotion, right? There is literally nothing else going on. It just so happens that we have this weird world where we measure people's emotion. We think of it as being rational, but it's all, everything is about predicting the future, right? That's all they're trying to do in a market, is predict the future. In this world, we're doing the same, yet we don't have any concept of how long our infrastructure costs will take. That's why, refactoring or whatever is such a well, the kind of things we choose to do often are just polishing our turds, right? Like, because infrastructure costs are so unknown, but infrastructure costs are where value is built, I think, right? If Apple didn't make their little goggle thing, you see what I mean? Like, they just sunk all that. Or if Facebook didn't go to try to discover 3D legless people walking around, or whatever they spent all their money on, it's still like, you have to do that, right? You have to put in the money, because otherwise you don't have another curve happening. You need that thing to come out of its unprofitability into profitability, and most of them die off, but the more you start, obviously, the better you are. And that's why if you had some sense of how things were going emotionally, you'd probably make better decisions. And by the way, guess who ripped off this idea? Me. And it's based on a thing called super forecasting, which is a terrific book, recommended to everybody. It's based on Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, but the idea is they wanted to find out who could actually predict the future. And what the methodology turned out to be was this. You continually reassess the emotional understanding of the problem, continually. And that's why this thing should act like a stock market. It's not a static report, right? Because things that were not being worked on can come back, and everything should be constantly in flux, right? If you really were getting data, and if you didn't get data, even that is meaningful, right? This thing is, and I was going to do a bunch of emojis, like this thing is dormant. This thing is, this thing has all the attention, or everyone's on vacation, or whatever. You see what I mean? So having this, I think, is unprecedented. And to me, if I could also build narratives out of how's it going, those little things like, yeah, I had to went to the dentist to get my teeth cleaned. You could build a narrative story easily, like, hey, this has been worked on, but then, had to go pick up his groceries from the store and then got locked out of his computer, whatever, right? Like you could easily have some context to why this thing was not maybe at the level you thought it would. And all of this would be that a strategist could probably do their job. And I'll just give all the credit to super forecasting because he proved it, that it actually does predict the future better using these techniques. And he had this big contest and everybody, was there trying to predict the future. Like, hey, is there going to be a war in Syria? Stuff like that, right? Super complicated problems, not trying to build software problems. but the technique is 100% based on it. But this was also in a time when you had humans that had to do all this. Now I'm like, well, I think you could dump a lot of this off to LLMs.
Yeah.
And it'd be really reliable, right? All it needs to do is summarize, and it needs to do confidence intervals when it comes to like ebbs and flows. It's not. Certainly it's not beyond it, right? And we wanted to have, we wanted to have, and also I think if you were typing and, as I said, it derived the energy level, that's fine too, right? It could say like super excited, okay, great. You say that a lot. I'm going to actually start to diminish its effectiveness score, right? Like it could actually learn over time, kind of how you act, which is what, we all hope from our instructors and our bosses and stuff like that. But honestly, they don't have any info to go on. You know what I mean? They can only do what we do, right? Which is grill each other for a few minutes and try to come up with a picture. Whereas this is actually less intrusive. And then therefore, hopefully when there is learning opportunities or something like that, it can be informed by this. Hey, it looks as though nobody understands what MCP means or whatever. I don't even remember what the damn thing's called now. It's called, yes, MCP. MCP, what does P stand for? Model Context Protocol.
Protocol. Yeah. Well, it's an idea. Think, boss? Yeah, it's an idea. I mean, so MCP is kind of nothing new, and the idea. I hope the idea is that, well, there's going to be those MCP servers that can do things for you, right? And
that's what I'm trying to figure out right now, because I want something that can see the whole context, but obviously you need some serious taxonomy and architecture, right? Like it understands I installed Node, but sometimes it doesn't know, like there's so many dependencies in these things. It gets completely crazy, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure you could just come in with a table and again, abstract it to 2 dimensions, so to speak, right? Like, and just analyze it. But when you're doing these things in real time and trying to do all these dependencies,
Mm.
that's a real system to me, right? Like it has to have a little bit of blood pumping through it. And getting those
Mm.
to work properly when you don't know what you're doing, like me, is pretty hard. But so I'm hoping this
Yeah.
context protocol thing gives it more
Mm, mm,
meta
mm,
info.
not really. And
Mm,
MCP is not going to be any magic. The way I understand it is that, well, there's going to be those servers, right? And in the agentic architectures, if you have the tools, you can annotate them and you can give them the context. And in most cases, you really kind of know what the tools, what are the tools that you want to use. And if you don't, then you can have this agent that is going to kind of read from the tool descriptions and kind of do it. But it's kind of like it's going to be like within your infrastructure, like within your Kubernetes, for example, pod or whatever. Now this MCP can be, let's say, you have a server in your basement, right? Quote unquote, and it's going to do something. And I have an agent, and that agent needs to find a solution that and doesn't have the tools locally that can solve it. So it's going to start looking, and maybe it will find that your server in your basement is broadcasting some sort of a description of what that particular you
mm,
know algorithm that you have can do, and then reach that, right? So in a way, it's not a new idea as well. um, but yeah, it might be kind of like help with the distributed aspect of the agentic processing. So yeah, it's not going to be a groundbreaking, but what I would like to say is that kind of feels like this is like your turf. That the idea that you are describing, this emotional process and the emotional model. So if you could flash out maybe a little bit more, this thing, like on a simpler example where you kind of enter those scores, or these scores kind of get created somehow, but then like associate them with something that maybe people like me can kind of understand. um, but I have a feeling that, yeah, that score will be impacting severely. I mean, it, it will be reflecting severely or explaining significantly, the problems that we might typically have. So I think there is a lot of this. There's a lot of value there, but but I think this is your turf. I know you. It's your turf. So yeah, why don't you run with this a little bit more, and then maybe we can kind of start building the infrastructure for it.
oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. This is the next steps are always to fumble around.
Mm,
But the core concept is this is still just a task list, right? There's nothing to separate it from um from any again, I'll just go to Jira, or you can just
mm,
go to anything where you have a goal and you've broken those goals down into tasks, and then you've assigned tasks to someone, right? So maybe this isn't your day to day,
mm,
but it would seem, at least in my world, that's pretty standard
mm,
as to how things happen. And then what we struggle with is either you have a cadence like there's different cadences you can put on things, such as, well, either way, I've never been in any company except one that was like strictly taught by a really smart person on how to actually do these things. You see what I mean? Most people
mm,
are a grab bag of old procedures, new procedures, etc. And there's tons and tons of people in the administration area. That's usually the case, right? So there's a
mm,
huge separation between administration and doing, and only occasionally do administrators do, right? Because it's really two different mindsets. That's why I call it a strategist and a doer, right? Like you kind of want to focus when you're a doer on the task at hand, and you're going to find all sorts of issues with the task at hand, right? Unless these things are
mm,
all easy to do, which there never are. They're always interconnected with all sorts of other problems. And then if, let's say you had a team and these people were not sitting next to each other, right? They're going to need to communicate. So people are always talking. People are always, there's this
Mm.
the emotional core is underneath all of it. And I don't know if do you ever experience that, right? I mean, certainly an emotional core could be triumph. Hey, I thought this was going to be hard and it was easier than I thought. Or GPT did it for me, which is sometimes I'm happy,
Mm.
right? Like I didn't want to have to learn this because it's not important for me to learn React, but so it can do it.
Mm.
And I know what a form is. I'm like, I just didn't,
Mm.
and syntax, I mean, can kill you,
Yeah.
and then I started to look at this like, now hold on, software engineering must be insanely inefficient. That's all I can see. It's like stuff is really hard, right? Like it is
Mm.
not fast. And I'm a little surprised any of it works now at all because I look at this stuff and people make it look easy. I was like, wow, this is really challenging to get things to behave.
Yeah.
But now again, we've got this new world of agentic stuff, which can not only talk, but it can obviously make code and it can do wash my, it's not going to wash my dishes actually. So never mind.
Mm.
So, I have to still wash my dishes when they're broken. And I don't mind washing dishes, right? I'm just saying people have our infrastructure costs because we have to learn. If we just even took this, let's say it was a learning module, right? How's everybody doing on the learning module this week? I do this all kind of
Mm.
mentally, right? I see if people participate. I gauge the level of participation and the attitudes in that as to performance, right? How are people doing? And then I try to do course correction all the time, right? You're lagging behind. This concept wasn't. See what I mean? I'll do all this with the help of a tool that I can visualize it, right? But I'm saying, don't we all have to do this all the time? And does not us, I'll get back to my waveform thing. In observing it, do we also destroy it? Have we collapsed to the waveform, Schrodinger's cat style,
Mhm.
when you really don't want to collapse the waveform? You
Mm.
want things to run, rather than to stop them and assess them until you get to certain points. And that's what I hope the dashboard is going to show you. It's going to show you when things are going south,
Okay.
which would honestly be the most valuable thing ever created, ever, I think, right? Because you don't have any insight otherwise, right? You're trying to measure, hey, are we making money? Well, that could all be incidental. See what I mean? It just
Mm.
happened, right? It's all incidental that you succeeded or failed. So any objective measurements sometimes are just lagging indicators. Hey, you did well just because you had a bunch of toilet paper and everybody wanted toilet paper. So you lucked out this time, right?
Mm.
But that doesn't mean your future toilet paper sales are going to continue your business upward trend.
Mm. Yeah, 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 exactly.
So
So
I'm
yeah,
trying to say the business all runs on bullshit. And this is a machine that tries to actually quantify what business really is, which is people.
Mm.
And people are the most important thing. And I'm trying to be the new humanist in the room, right? Like we actually need to reinforce what makes people valuable, which
Mm.
isn't their output, it's their intention. Their ability to focus and their ability to solve these very, very hard problems, right? Of
Mm.
insane, can't even say how many problems there are in this that are all not solvable by me asking GPT about it.
So you're thinking that the output from the system is going to be that score, that evaluation of human, happiness and perception and whatever, or do you also feel like there's going to be like a remedy? So because you will have to understand the model, you will have to understand what's really going on under the hood. So you might as well to kind of act on that knowledge rather than just kind of say, hey, we are going in the wrong direction.
Well, there's a parent-child relationship here, which is not being shown. And
Mhm.
one thing is goal, right? What is the goal? Can you articulate it? And if you don't mind, you're working towards some sort of goal right now, I assume. Do you mind? Can
Yeah.
you articulate it?
Well, one of the goals would be to develop generative AI system that is going to be converting human questions to SQL statements, right? Like that's kind of like a goal, right?
Well, isn't there a higher goal than that in order to do what?
Well, yeah. So the higher, so yeah. So on the higher level, you could say that you wanna have a conversational system with reporting tools, right? So your reporting tool is not the graph that you click on and it displays for you, but it's you have data in your databases and
Mhm.
you want to analyze what's there, right? So you want to have a conversation with your database rather than looking at a Tableau report that is difficult to interpret.
Okay. Oh, okay. So you are saying I want to do this, right? And the value is implicit in that nowadays people have difficulty understanding Tableau reports. Tableau reports are expensive, so there's some negatives already built in, right?
Mhm.
Lack of effectiveness, lack of or high cost, cost a lot and not effective. How's that? Those are two whammies right there, right? And there's also built-in uh, people don't want to learn to understand the Tableau reports. You see what I mean? There's
Mhm.
actually an emotional basis behind this as well. Oh, people are brand new to this and they really have no reason
Yeah,
to invest in understanding how to read Tableau reports, let's say. Or
yeah,
the people who build the Tableau reports have been downsized to the fact that they're really not motivated to build good Tableau reports, or again, there's a lot of levers you could pull, but you're also kind of
exactly.
painting the
Yeah.
picture that you don't want to pull those levers. Instead, you want to rely on this brand new shiny ability, right? And not invest in those two things. So, already emotional decisions have been made,
Hmm.
let's say, or you're just one of those investment things, right? We're going to try it, could fail, right? We could still build reports and have them be not read
Hmm.
and not understood. How's that, right? Like that's the status quo. It's seemingly, not terrible, but we could do better. And so we're going to sink some costs in here. And one of those goals then is to be able to have a conversation with your data, which would start to, I almost seem like that would break into tasks, right? Because you could say conversation number one, like how many
Oh yeah, definitely.
peas are
Yeah.
in this pod? You see what I mean? Like there's probably some gauges of the kinds of conversations. Because
Yeah,
if
definitely.
understanding is the
Hmm.
goal, or let's
Hmm.
say you want these people to have a conversation, change their behavior. Again, the point is you're never getting away from humans. That's my whole point. Like humans are always going to be in this mix. Sorry,
Hmm.
engineers.
Hmm.
They're really unpredictable and you've already defined your goals based on their lack of ability. Isn't that funny?
Hmm.
And I've been there too. I was in the big, I was in a very big company and building the report so they could make decisions about how to make money,
Hmm.
and all they get to see is charts. And what I said and what I still believe is they don't need a chart, they need a story. Here is a story that we want to tell, right?
Hmm.
And this story is worth telling. Where Bill sees something, well, like I'm going to say, the strategist sees that their plan is bad. Never has happened in the history of the world, right? That's you reassess based on data that
Hmm.
your plan is emotionally, you don't have the staff for it, you don't have people motivated to do it. Like how would you ever
Hmm.
know that stuff, right? Unless if you were watching the football team play, you could be like, God, Jim usually catches that. He must be having a bad day. Maybe
Hmm.
it's because too much wine last night. You see what I mean? Stories are the only way we understand anything. Or you could say, he didn't catch that thing. We paid him to catch that thing. So now we need to fire him.
Hmm.
very different stories, but you can see how both are valid based on, some sort of outcome you were looking for. You wanted him to catch the ball. You trained him to catch the ball. He's supposed to catch the ball, and he didn't catch the ball. Sorry, I hate sports metaphors, but
Mhm.
what can I say? If we're building a building, it's weird that buildings don't tend to fall down as much anymore, but they tend to get unfunded because the goals the building was supposed to have aren't valid anymore, or the software we were going to build isn't valid anymore. And that's where I'm looking for rapid feedback, if you can't tell, right? Like feedback moment by moment.
And I would probably up until maybe last year, I would probably disagree with you, with hey, the
I
stories,
want
right?
you to disagree with
The
me.
problem, the
ChatGPT always
problem with
likes what I have to say. I
the
don't know why.
problem, yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. So the problem with the stories is that nobody wants to read the story, right? And if and yes, it's a very effective way to try, to describe
Yeah.
information. Actually, that's what I'm trying to do, right? I'm trying to generate SQL that kind of gets me the data, and then the large language model tells the story about what's in that data, rather than having a static, Power BI, whatever, chart. So nobody wants to read the story, or nobody wants to absorb the story. And up until maybe recently, that was really, I think that was a blocker for your ideas.
Mhm.
But today we have large language models that begin to generate video. So I'm now kind of saying, hey, now we're going to have a high bandwidth modality that you will be selling the stories through the large language models. I mean, the things that we are doing right now, where you type something and ChatGPT will spit out some paragraph of text, that is just the beginning of what's coming. Because what's going to happen is that that camera that is in your computer is going to be connected to the large language model, and that screen that you are looking at is not going to be your eye. It's going to be the whatever the large language model generates. And then that is where the stories can get really interesting, can be tailored. So yeah, so now, as of maybe this year, or whatever, whatever the time was that the storytelling through video generated through AI becomes feasible, I totally agree with you actually now. That yes, we don't want charts, we want stories. We don't want look at tables and look at the bolded total number underneath, at the bottom of the table. We want a story, what that number represents. And then all that's emotional stuff that you can fold into the mix is now very, very possible, because I think we can model emotions through software or through AI. We've been able to do that a long time ago. So yeah, this all kind of has a lot of purpose now. I guess I agree.
Well, and remember, we still have the blind spot you're talking about. The story itself, to certain perspectives, right? The story that you're working on right now might be, unpack SQL into a blob that does, whatever. Like you might have some sort of procedure that you're working on, right? And maybe you're just trying to make that more reliable, or who knows, or just see if it works at all. Either way, right? You might have stages. But at some point, there's this weird concept of being done with something. And a lot of times we have that concept, Boolean concept. So I'm actually trying to propose a non-Boolean concept. Things never really get done, right? They are just going to be important, and then they become unimportant, right? Because everything is a force feedback into the next thing. You see what I mean? Like things are not static. These tasks are meaningless. And you're right. If I sat out and said, hey, you've finished 15 tasks, I will tell you right now, I had a job once where I was supposed to do X amount of things, right? I was supposed to do 20 or 30. I figured out how to do 150. All right. Am I brilliant? No. I just figured out how to do 150. That was all, right? I was actually didn't spend any extra time. I just figured out how to do it. Now, if I was being counted, I should be the most valuable person on earth, but honestly, the outcome didn't change. You see what I mean? So we're always, what I'm trying to get at is if we don't count on the things that people are good at, which is, of course, at the moment, let's call it decision making, right?
Mm.
Decisions are very fraught. And in fact, I kind of wrote this, we invented society in order to manage decision making, right? Very complex world we live in, basically, so that people can't do everything that they want. And it doesn't mean that now that we have these computers that can talk nice, they can't make decisions. And I'm still going to be on, I don't think they ever will. They can inform our decisions, which can be bad or good, but I don't think they will ever be in charge of anything. If they are, we're kind of screwed because you see that they had to put in all these safeguards of arbitrage because everybody's got their robots to sell and buy stock at certain things, and so they have to cut them off because they have false positives all the time, right? They're not clever, and that's the problem with a lot of these they're primitive. I mean, you've worked on tons of software, right? They're in everything. If it's over 12, it's bad. You see what I mean? Like that's a hard-coded value. So I'm trying to have a malleable thing where completion doesn't matter, but you ramp all this up to be how confident are we that this goal will be reached, which will change every single day until the goal is reached. And as you've just probably mentioned, that goal will probably just lead into another goal. Because that's the world I'm in. You test it and it doesn't work, right?
Absolutely.
Hey, and you could say, hey, we got to train these people. I'm like, no, you didn't define the problem well enough, right? You're supposed to see that making things real in a human world is actually challenging. But if you're only going to have one-dimensional look at things, this is adding 2 dimensions, but it's still, I think, keeping the fun part of confidence intervals, because I think that's all people do is try to figure out how confident are they, and most people just lie about it after a while, right? Wouldn't you? I mean, it's really hard to tell. I certainly don't think, unless you're constantly seeing if the cat is dead, how do you know anything, right? Unless you let the system itself kind of measure and hopefully, I mean, did you see the nudges in here? I'm like, you can also help the person if they're struggling and have low energy, right? That's a perfect context for an AI to say like, hey, now the AI's literally spit out 500 lines of instructions to me. And I'm like, haven't you guys figured out that humans can only take like one thing at a time? Like, I mean, I'd say go ahead and just do it all, and I can be happy to check it. But I'm griping. I mean, we're early in the game, right? We're still only a couple years into this game, so we're hopefully very future forward, and we're totally out of time.
Yeah. So, great idea. I think, let me get the super forecasting book, and kind of dive into those concepts a little bit more. But I think there's something to it.
As always, you're the only one I trust because you push up against my ideas, which I'm too used to GPT being way too excited about them. I have to, you have to kind of take things slow.
Yeah. Well, let's see what happens. Yeah, I think we have some vision. I mean, you have some vision, and maybe I can.
I need you. I mean, come on.
Some engineering is going to be maybe necessary.
100%. I'm way out of my depth. But as I said, I'm still trying to be an architect. I can still architect, I hope. We'll see.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Next week.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah. I will see you. And cut.
So speaking of which, I can send you this because I got approached from an article I wrote about this tool, and I didn't have a use for it, but it literally is your use case. You put in spreadsheets and you ask questions about it. It is called, hold on one moment, I'll find it. Where would I put it?
I have a hard stop, Mike. So maybe
Of
kind of
course you do.
just
I'll
give
send
me.
it to you later, but I didn't
Yeah.
have any use case for it, so I was really unable, and they want me to write an article about it. So maybe if I find it, I'll send it to you and you can play around with it
Well,
and just tell me how
well,
much it sucks or something, and then I can
mhm.
extrapolate. But go. See you.
Yeah, and I will see you on Saturday.
Yeah, see you on Saturday.
Yeah, all right.
All right.
Take
Cheers.
care.